Let's talk about cognitive load and how it's really important to understand if we want to be the best problem solvers, decision makers, truth seekers that we can be. Now, cognitive load is a theory in cognitive science that has a lot of relevance for education, for our own personal growth and development, but for trying to tackle all sorts of problems in our lives. Here's the basic concept behind cognitive load. And by the way, if I've actually taught this on the graduate level and the like, but I'm going to do it in just very kind of simple terms here. I'm not going to go into kind of the detailed terminology or other things. I'll just talk about it this way in a very broad way. A broad understanding of cognitive load is a recognition that when we are experiencing the world, we're experiencing it through things we see, through things we hear, through things we feel, through things that so the variety of senses that we're dealing with, right? But there are only so many inputs that you can take in at the same time and still be able to make sense of what's happening. So for example, it's really hard for me to look at 4 different things at the same time. Now I could look at one thing and hear one thing at the same time, and that might actually enhance my attention, my ability to make sense of it and understand it. But if I have to hear 5 different things at the same time, or look at 3 things and hear 2 different things, you notice how that's going to overwhelm my brain's capacity to really pay attention and get a lot out of it. Give you an example of this. I actually was interested in cognitive load and how it showed up in actually formal schools and classrooms a number of years ago. And so I was really intrigued when these technologies came out years ago called the smartboard. Many of you watching probably know what this was. It was kind of you took the traditional idea of a whiteboard in a classroom and it was digitized and you were able to connect your computer to it so you could interact with things on the smartboard. And a lot of teachers became intrigued by how to use the smartboard, but they added it to everything else in the room. So I remember going and sitting in this math class, and there was a teacher, and he had the new smartboard that he was putting math equations on. He was teaching a math lesson. And then he had the traditional whiteboard next to it that he was using as well. And he had the students with their notebooks on their desks, and then they had their textbooks open to a relevant page, which meant, and you had the instructor, the teacher, who was standing in the front of the room saying, "Look at me." So the students literally had to shift their visual attention among 5 things: the instructor, their whiteboard, the interactive whiteboard or smartboard, their textbook, and their notebook. That is a lot. So that's going to overwhelm a person's ability to really concentrate and pay attention. Now, what I just shared with you, this in simple ways shows up in our lives all the time. We don't even realize it. We don't pay attention to it. That's why I'm often skeptical of people who talk about multitasking. While there is such a thing as multitasking and it can be useful, we want to be careful that it's not just some kind of fancy way of putting ourselves in cognitive overload and decreasing our ability to attend. Now, there's one other nuance that I will mention that I think is kind of fascinating and intriguing, which is complexity of information and how you receive it and how quickly you receive it and from how many sources. If you are really an expert in something and you're getting something and it's coming too slowly and it's coming in too simple of a format, that may actually make it more complex for you, harder for you to follow. And if you are a novice at something, you may need something to come a little bit slower. So cognitive load is not universal. Different people may need to kind of manage the input and the number of input sources and things like that a little bit differently to get the best result for themselves. So keep in mind that this is personalized. So with that in mind, let me talk about 5 practices, 5 things that you can do to make use of this wisdom of cognitive load theory to be a better problem solver and metaphorical and literal treasure hunter and all those other things that I talk about on this channel. So the first one is simplify the frame. So you want to reduce how much you're holding at once by rewriting the problem in simpler, clearer chunks or language. So take a look at what you're dealing with and see if there's a way for you to simplify it without removing important facts and the like. So you can kind of reduce the amount that you really have to pay attention to. See if you can't get to the essence, the core elements or pieces. That can be really useful, and it's just a great habit and practice in a lot of areas of life anyway. The second one is try to offload some things. from your memory. So use diagrams and lists and sketches and sticky notes and notebooks and other things like that. It's so amazing to me how many people don't actually do this when they're trying to solve big problems, or when they are actually on like a literal treasure hunt or whatever. Taking notes, doing diagrams, doing these things, what it allows you to do is to extend your memory using kind of an external memory, because I can keep some of the main ideas in my memory, but then I can reference these other items and quickly kind of bring them in and out of my memory. It allows me to handle a bigger body of knowledge. So keep that in mind. The third one is eliminate any unnecessary let's call it mental noise, maybe. If you want to minimize distractions, you want to declutter, you want to get rid of the things that are kind of overwhelming and distracting you, and just kind of learn to move things aside. That's why I actually find it useful to go to a clean, clear, simple space sometimes when I'm taking on a new problem, just because I don't want to be distracted by the old stuff. So you can come up with some different personal hacks and strategies to do this, but find ways that you can eliminate the unnecessary stuff, the stuff that's distracting you. And then the fourth one is what's sometimes called chunking or clustering. So when you have bodies of knowledge, say I have a list of 75 items that are important for my decision that I'm considering. 75 is a lot to pay attention to. But what if those are really 75 items that fit into 5 key categories or 7 key categories? So now I can have 10 items in 7 different categories, or 10 or 11 items in 7 different categories. And now I've broken them up into some logical chunks that make it easier for me to keep my head around the whole thing. And that can be very, very useful in our thinking when we're trying to solve a problem or discover a treasure or something like that. You'll find that people in the treasure hunting world, because I know that some of the people who follow my videos are part of the John Collins Black, There's Treasure Inside Treasure Hunt, or some new one, or some of the older ones that have been going on. But people who are really good at designing treasure hunts, they create blueprints and maps. And people who solve them are pretty good at trying to recreate the blueprints and the maps. So don't be afraid of trying to chunk things and identify the order and the structure and label it and name it. That's going to make it easier for you to keep your head around it and not get into that place of cognitive overload. And then the fifth one is you want to train your schema. So schema building is it's a creation of mental frameworks. So here's the best way to describe this. So if you have a bunch of examples of how people have solved similar problems in the past in your mind, or you have some like graphic organizers, ways to quickly organize things, Venn diagrams and other approaches to organize information in your head. If you have some structures, some ways that you can hang ideas on them, then it's easier for you to quickly organize new information so that you don't achieve cognitive overload. So come up with your own little toolbox of ways to quickly organize and structure information in ways that are useful. I have another video where I talk about something that I've found very useful, for example, called the Memory Palace, which is when I'm trying to memorize a list of 10 to 12 items, and I don't need to remember it long term, but maybe I'm going to the grocery store and I want to try to remember the 12 items. I will remember a place from my childhood, like my childhood home. And I will picture myself walking from one place of the home to another. So I always start with my front door, and then I open the front door, and I would walk in, and there were 5 steps, and I go up, and then there's a door that goes into the kitchen, and then from there are these little flap doors, like old saloon that would go through, and then there was a hallway with a bathroom, and then from there was my bedroom on the right. And usually those were that in my mind I had these places. So I created this mental schema. So when I needed to remember a list of items, I would actually just picture myself putting things, like I'd hang a salmon on the door because I needed to get salmon at the grocery store. And then I wanted to buy some soda. So I would put bottles of soda on the stairs mentally. And then I wanted to get some popcorn. And so I'd scatter popcorn seeds on my memory on the floor of the kitchen as I walk through. And I would go through and I'd literally put the items there, and it seems kind of absurdist, which is why you remember it easier. And so you're able to make sense and organize this information. It doesn't take as much effort on your mind if you're able to attach it to something. Or I even remember learning, to this day, I can name the first 10 presidents of the United States because of a simple schema that I use. So 1 ton, 2 pair, 3 tree, 4 star, 5 foot, 6 pack, 7 up, 8 ATE, 9 iron, and 10 tent. So I just literally have a word associated with each of those 10. So now when I want to learn a list of 10 things, I tie them to those words or phrases, and it gives me a mental schema. So the first 10 presidents are 1 ton, Washington; 2 pair, the first pair, Adam and Eve, Adams; 3 tree, a fir tree, Jefferson; 4 star, closest star is the sun, Madison; 5 foot, I rode the boat with my foot, Monroe; 6 pack of Adams, yes, there's another Adams; 7 up and cracker, Jackson, go figure. 8, I ate in my van, Van Buren. 9 iron, it was a hairy shot, Harrison. 10, tie the tent down, Tyler. Now, I know that seems a little bit absurdist, but it actually works. It's a schema that I use to memorize things. Well, similarly, there are all sorts of schemas or systems, little tools that you can come up to hang thoughts on, organize your thoughts and ideas. And if you come up with some that you find useful, you can use them over and over again in different situations. They can be very powerful when you're trying to solve problems or discover things or remember things that are relevant to a given situation. So that's all I have for you in this video. I hope you find it useful. I wish you the best as you go about reducing your cognitive load and solving those problems and discovering those metaphorical and literal treasures. Thanks.